Hello and welcome everyone. This is Minu at AngloLink. Today's video is all about listening comprehension. I have some interesting tips for you. This is particularly for those of you who still find it a little hard to understand native speakers, or watch television in English, or listen to the radio in English. I'll be telling you about some specific aspects of the English sound system and some speech patterns that native speakers use that can make listening in English a little bit of a challenge. By the end of this video, you will have a really good understanding of where the difficulties that you might be facing come from and what you can do to overcome them and really improve your listening comprehension. So, when you're ready, let's begin. Right. Today I'd like to share 3 keys with you that will really improve your listening comprehension of native speakers. Let's look at what these 3 keys are. The first thing is to understand what makes native speakers hard to understand. The second key is improving your own pronunciation. And the third key to improving your listening comprehension is learning primarily with your ears rather than your eyes. Okay, let's start with understanding what makes native speakers hard to understand. There are 2 main reasons for this. The first one is the great number of vowels and diphthongs in English, and some of these are very similar to each other. There are many words where the consonants are exactly the same, and by changing the vowel sound, the meaning changes. And when these vowel sounds are very similar, and especially if one or the other doesn't exist in your own language, this can make it quite a challenge to understand a native speaker. Let's look at some examples. These are called minimal pairs, by the way. Same consonants, different vowels. Minimal pairs. Boat and bought. Mad, mud. Hurt, heart. Men, main. Than, then. Bit, bet. Live, leave. So notice the only difference is the vowel or the diphthong, and they can be very, very similar. So in connected speech, they're not easy to tell apart. This is the first reason why listening to English native speakers can be challenging. Now, let's look at the second reason. The second reason is the way that native speakers shorten and link sounds. Let's give you a quick example. Look at this sentence. How is it going? You will hear from a native speaker, how's it going? There are 3 specific speech patterns that all native speakers use, and I'm going to take you through them one by one. Speech pattern number 1 is contractions, contracted verbs and negatives. You're pretty familiar with these. I'm, he's, they'll, we've, won't, can't, etc. What is important to remember is that native speakers always use these patterns when they speak, except when they want to stress a point. That is why there is a difference in tone and meaning between "Okay, I'll do it" and "I will do it. Nothing can stop me." When we use the contraction, there is no stress on the contracted form, there is no particular emotion. In the other example, when you've used the full form, "I will do it," you want to show determination. So, as using contractions is the norm rather than the exception in spoken English, I would recommend that you try and use them as much as possible yourself. Firstly, you will sound more natural, and secondly, you'll be able to hear them more easily when native speakers use them. Just be careful not to use contractions in formal writing. When you're writing a letter or a report or an article, always keep it to the full form. Keep the contractions for speaking. Moving on to speech pattern number 2. Speech pattern number 2 is called weak forms. Grammatical words such as modal verbs, possessive adjectives, prepositions, etc. are seldom fully pronounced in a sentence. The vowel in them is reduced to a shorter vowel or disappears completely. Let's look at some examples. Here we have the modal verb can. In the sentence, it will sound like can. The vowel disappears. I can ski. Let's look at another example. Possessive adjective my. Very clear in isolation, my. But in the sentence, it sounds, here's my book. You can hardly hear it. And another example, preposition for. In the sentence, the vowel is reduced to f. It's for you. Now, you don't need to use these weak forms at all when you speak, as your message will be even clearer without using them. However, you do need to be aware of them and anticipate them when listening to a native speaker. Let's look at speech pattern 3, which is phonetic links. Generally, any word that starts with a vowel is linked to the previous word, and this makes it hard to hear each word distinctively. Let's look at some examples. He works as an engineer. You've got 3 words that begin with a vowel, as, an, and engineer. In connected speech, they all run into each other. He works as an engineer. Second example. Here you have 4 words that begin with a vowel. Is, interested, in, it. And they all run into each other. She is interested in it. And there's a semi-vowel, y, that links the vowel at the end of she to the vowel at the beginning of is. She is. And our third example, 2 words, one ending with a T, the next one starting with a T, they run into each other, and then 2 words starting with a vowel, an, amazing. Once again, all this section runs into each other. They went to an amazing place. And once again, you have the semi-vowel W that connects the vowels to and an to each other. Once again, you don't necessarily need to use these links when you speak, as your message will be perfectly clear without them. However, you do need to be aware of them and anticipate them when you listen to native speakers. Now, often you get at least 2 of these speech patterns, sometimes even all 3, in a row in a sentence, and that is when you can feel really challenged. Let's look at an example here. He won't accept it from me. You have the contraction, won't. You have 2 words beginning with a vowel, accept and it, and you have the preposition from. So in connected speech, you will hear, he won't accept it from me. At this point, you are probably asking yourself, well, what's the best way to familiarize myself with these speech patterns? I think the best way is transcribing audio files. If you already have a CD of dialogues with transcripts, then listen to the dialogues and write them out, and then compare what you have written with the transcript. If you do not have such CDs, I recommend Anglofiles 104 and 108 from AngloLink's selection of audio files that you can access on our website, anglolink.com. These are selections of daily dialogues and business dialogues, which you can listen to and transcribe, and then check what you've written against the transcripts on the site. This will really improve your listening comprehension of native speakers, and at the same time will help you to activate loads of useful functional expressions. Now, if you have never studied the English sound system, if you've never studied pronunciation on its own, I strongly recommend our Anglophile 117. In this Anglophile, you will have a complete list of all the vowels, of all the diphthongs, all the consonants in English that you can practice. It also has loads of minimal pair exercises that will help you to distinguish vowel sounds that are similar from each other. It also has a section on the speech patterns we've looked at. You can listen to weak forms, contractions, and phonetic links and transcribe them. This will be really helpful if you have not familiarized yourself with the English sound system yet. Now, if you want, you can do a transcription exercise now by clicking on this image. If you prefer to continue listening to the presentation, you will have the chance at the end of the presentation to do it then. Right, so once you've familiarized yourself with the English sound system and also know how native speakers shorten and link sounds, the next step is to improve your own pronunciation. Clearly, if you're mispronouncing a word because you learned it by reading and guessed how it was pronounced, then it is likely that you will not catch it when you hear it. There are two common traps if you have guessed the pronunciation of a word by reading it. The first common pronunciation trap is believing that two words with the same spelling will have the same sound. Let's give you an example. If you think that the combination of letters E and A always sound like E, as in Jean, then you will mispronounce the following words. Great, hear, learn, instead. So, this is the best example of the same combination of letters, EA, having 5 different sounds. Another tricky letter is the letter U. If you imagine that the letter U always sounds like U, as in put, you will mispronounce the two following words, judge and furious, because the letter U is sometimes U, many times A, and occasionally U. Okay, let's look at the second common pronunciation trap, which is word stress. In many languages, the strength of your voice is spread equally among the syllables in a word. In English, however, if you have more than one syllable in your word, you have to decide which syllable or syllables take the stress of your voice and which ones are de-stressed. Let's look at an example. Here's a word with 4 syllables. Now, Let's decide which syllable takes the stress. Is it the first one, development? Is it the second one, development? The third one, development? Or the last syllable, development? In this case, it's the second syllable, development. Now, you couldn't know that unless you have heard the word many, many times. Let's look at the second example. Let's look at these two words. They seem very similar in their spelling, so you would expect them to have the same rhythm, the same music, the same word stress. However, in the first one, it's the second syllable that's stressed, and in the second one, it's the first syllable, and that changes the pronunciation completely. The first word is propose, and the second word is purpose. So what is the conclusion of the examples we've looked at the pronunciation traps we've looked at? Well, the conclusion is that you have to avoid guessing how a word is pronounced. Always check the pronunciation of the words that you're learning. Either ask someone or use a talking dictionary. Talking dictionaries are now widely available on the internet, and you can listen to the word several times, and with some of them you can even record your own voice and compare your pronunciation with the model, which is an excellent exercise. Again, you don't need to be 100% correct in your own pronunciation to be understood. But if you have not heard the correct pronunciation of a word enough times, you risk not catching it when it is spoken by a native speaker in a stream of other words with phonetic links and weak forms surrounding it. So do work on your own pronunciation. It's an important key to improving your listening comprehension. And finally, to the third key to improving your listening comprehension. Learn primarily with your ears rather than your eyes. Now you have a better understanding of why native speakers are not always easy to understand, especially if you have learned your English out of a book. It's for the simple reason that what you see is not what they say. Therefore, the best way to learn new words and expressions is by first hearing them, then saying them in writing. So here are some final hints on how to use your ears instead of your eyes. Listen to audiobooks rather than read the printed version of the book. Listen to the radio and watch programs and films in English as much as possible. Even if at first you understand very little, this is a great exercise to tune your ears into the sounds, rhythm, and the music of the language. You will be surprised how quickly you will start to hear and understand more and more. If you're using a course book, work more with the accompanying CD than the book itself. And finally, if you're using a word you have learned by reading and have never heard it before, make sure you check the pronunciation. To give you more tools to improve your listening comprehension and pronunciation, we have recorded all the grammar exercises that you have access to on anglolink.com. These are available as audio files, and they ensure that you also learn the correct pronunciation and intonation of the important structures and the useful expressions that we have included in our Anglopedia. Now, if you didn't do the transcription exercise earlier on, this is your chance to do it now. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to improve your listening comprehension and found all the tips useful. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in our next video. Bye now.